The people who have the disease, who are the controls? The ones who don't have it. Yes? Okay. So, based on this design, you can work on rare diseases. Yes? For example, a disease like loboplaque carcinoma of the mouse. It is so rare. If we want to work on such a rare disease, it is better to use case control study. Why? Because we have known case of loboplaque carcinoma, and we have, for example, a registry of those patients. We can select these cases and find some controls for this disease. Yes?
Yes.
But we have another kind of study design, that is cohort study. Cohort means a group of people. It is a Roman word, means a group of population with similar characteristics. You are a cohort. Which cohort? International medicine, medical students in Peace Center. You have some similar characteristics regarding, for example, your age, your interest, your background knowledge, or something like that. Yes? So you are a cohort. Cohort study is a kind of observational study related to analytical aspects, analytical categorization. Yes? Based on the level of evidence, cohort study has the highest level among observational studies. We have case control studies. These three types of observational study, cohort study has the highest level of evidence. It means that the strongest level of evidence among observational studies is related to cohort study, comes from this. In this session, we want to describe the designs of cohort studies and options for the conduct of longitudinal studies. Longitudinal studies means cohort studies during time, I mean, to illustrate the cohort study design with two important examples and to discuss some potential biases in cohort studies. When we want to design a study, first of all, we want to find an association. Yes? Is there any association, for example, between high cholesterol level and cardiovascular disease, as I explained to you in the previous session? After that, in the second step, we want to assess if this association is causal or not. So, if you can find any evidence related to causality, it is a good level of evidence for us. I made you an example about the difference between between cross-sectional and cohort study, about breaking a window by a stone. Did you remember? In cohort study, as I explained to you, we consider that baby and see that, watch that, he wants to break the window using that stone. So, the window is not broken at the first of our study, at the first of our watching. Yes? So, it is clear that in cohort study, we have some healthy population. Did you remember the concept of incidence? Yes? It was risk. Risk among at-risk population. I told you that if somebody is diabetic, he is not at risk for being diabetic again. So, to assess, to investigate the incidence of diabetes, it is clear that you should study on healthy population who are not diabetics right now at the beginning of the study. Yes? So, we have some healthy population without our disease of interest. And after that, we watch, we follow them for a long period of time. It depends on the aim of our study. For example, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, etc. Some of those individuals, healthy individuals, are exposed to an exposure, that is our question, and somebody are not exposed. For example, some of them are smokers, some of them are not. And we will follow them for example, several years and follow what proportion among exposed are being diseased and what proportion of not exposed individuals are being diseased. So, it is a kind of movie. Yes, cross-sectional study, I told you that it is a kind of snapshot, photo, picture, but cohort has time during it and it looks like a movie. Based on these design, we can count, we can estimate incidence. Why? Because we can find new events. As you remember the formula of incidence, the definition was number of new cases divided by population at risk. So we can find the exact time of disease occurrence. Why? Because we are watching, we are monitoring these population. So we can find the disease population at the earliest time and find who are diseased and who are not. Okay, it means temporality. I told you the meaning of temporality in the previous session. Temporality is the priority of risk factor compared to disease. It means that in these types of studies, we make certain that risk factor happened before disease. Why? Because at the beginning, we start with healthy population. We know that they are not diseased. How? For example, we can test their blood and measure, for example, the level of fasting blood plasma glucose and know that these 1,000 populations are not diabetics. Some of them are smokers, some of them are not, and we will follow them, for example, for 5 years. After 5 years, we test them again and find who are diabetics right now based on the beginning status regarding their smoking. We have 2 groups, smokers are healthy at the beginning of the study. After a while, what proportion of exposed and what proportion of non-exposed are being diseased, diabetes? So we can make sure that smoking begins before being diabetes. So it means temporality. This slide summarizes all the subjects that I explained to you. We have a group of healthy individuals. We assess exposure of interest. We have time and assess outcome. Outcome could be negative, sometimes could be positive. For example, deaths, disease, recurrence, or recovery. Yes? Sometimes, for example, outcome is losing weight in obese population or something like that. So outcome is not necessarily negative. Sometimes it is negative, sometimes it is positive. Does smoking increase your risk of lung cancer?
Yes.
It is clear right now, but for example, in 50 years ago, it was not clear. It was necessary to have a cohort study in which we are able to answer to this question. Okay? For example, does air pollution, for example, increase the risk of, for example, obesity or something like that? When you want to speak about the risk of something, it means that you need incidence. It means that you should have time. It means that in this scenario, to answer to these types of questions, you should have cohort design. If you want to calculate, estimate risk of lung cancer, at the beginning, the people are free of lung cancer. Yes?
Yes.
They are healthy, but some of them are smokers, some of them are non-smokers. You can follow them, and after some years, you can define if they are diseased or not. It is the summary of cohort study. So, based on these, exposed and not exposed, we have 4 cells, 4 categories, as the same as cross-sectional study. Are you? Do you remember? Yes. Disease, no disease, exposed and not exposed. In case control study, we have these 2 by 2 table as well. This table is the heart of epidemiologic design. But the interpretation and the usage of these 4 cells are different. Why? Because it has time. Exposed and not exposed, we start with this. And after that, we say something about development of disease and being healthy after some years. But in cross-sectional study, I told you that measurement of exposure and disease at the same time. We measure them at the same time, but we have time and measurement of exposure and disease are not simultaneously. Okay? First, select exposed and not exposed. This is develop A. This is does not develop B. Not exposed, this is develop C. Not exposed, this is does not develop B. Who are exposed? A plus B. Yes? Who are not exposed? C plus D. What is incidence rate of disease among exposed? A divided by A plus B. Cumulative incidence. It is a proportion. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yes. Incidence rate of disease among not exposed, C divided by C plus D. This slide shows us the results of a hypothetical cohort study of smoking and coronary heart disease. First, select smoke cigarettes. Don't smoke cigarettes. We have 3,000 smokers and 5,000 non-smokers. CHD develops in 84 smokers and in 87 non-smokers. So, what is the incidence of disease among smokers? 84
divided by 3,000.
divided by 3,000. Yeah? How about, excuse me. What is the incidence among non-smokers? 87 divided by 5,000. Yes?
Yes.
And you can compare these two incidence rates to each other to test if they are statistically different or not. If yes, it means that exposure has association by disease, by outcome. This kind of association is nearer to causality. Why? Because we know that risk factor is before the disease. So it could be a kind of risk factor and causal relationship. But it is not necessarily true. It is more nearer to causality, but it is not exactly the causality. If we want to be certain that it is a clue of causality, we should need a stronger evidence. The next level is RCT, randomized controlled trial, that we will review in the next session. Okay, the level of evidence in RCT is stronger than cohort. Cohort is very well, but RCT is stronger than cohort study.
So what was causality?
Causality? You want to know that, for example, a risk factor is a cause of disease. Yes? For example, smoking is a cause of obesity. Is it a cause or just it has association? To find if it is a cause or it has just association, correlation, you should find some clues of causality. We will review in this course, and at the final sessions, we will review the evidence of causality. Because the final and ultimate goal of epidemiology is to find the reason behind some diseases. Yes? Okay. elements of prospective cohort is concurrent cohort or longitudinal study. We are here and start our study with exposure and not exposure. And during time, we watch and monitor, we follow the participants to find outcome and not outcome. It is concurrent because the investigator identifies the original population at the beginning of the study and follows the subjects concurrently through calendar time until the point at which the disease develops or does not develop. To select the exposed and not exposed individuals for starting the study, we have two approaches. One of them is starting with exposed and not exposed, then follow for disease. For example, my question of interest is association between asbestosis and lung cancer. Or, for example, a kind of chemical exposure and, for example, skin cancer. We should find some exposed population. Have you ever been experienced by asbestosis? No. If I select, for example, 1,000 individuals from the community and ask them about the history of having exposure with asbestosis or not, I cannot find any exposed as much as I want. Yes, because the exposure is rare. How can we find exposed population? I can go, for example, to the factory in which the workers are exposed with asbestosis. So, we can start with selecting exposed and not exposed. For example, in that part of factory, the workers are exposed with asbestosis, and at that, for example, part, they are doing official work and they don't expose, they are not exposed with asbestosis. These are exposed, these are not exposed, and we will follow them for example, 10 years to find the accidents, the events among them. But sometimes we may start with defined population if the exposure is common. For example, smoking cigarette is common. If I select 1,000 individuals from the community based on the prevalence of smoking in the community, if it is, for example, 20%, 200 of that population are smokers. So it is not necessary to firstly select exposed and unexposed. I will select a population as a whole, for example, 1,000 population, and after that, I can ask them if you are a smoker or not. And after a while, I can separate them to different categories based on the situation of exposure. So, in this scenario, the exposure is common. In this scenario, the exposure is rare. So, we should select exposed and not exposed at first. Okay? For example, Kish residents and ask them about, for example, having diabetes. Diabetes here is our exposure, for example. Some of them are diabetes, some of them are not, and we will follow them to find the incidence of myocardial infarction among them. We want to know if diabetes is a risk factor of myocardial infarction or not. Yes? If the prevalence of diabetes is 10% among Kish population, we expect that of 1,000 population that we recruit in our study, 100 are diabetics. Yes? And 900 are healthy, and we will follow them for several years to find myocardial infarction. Okay? So we have two basic ways to generate our study population.
Ma'am, can we study two diseases simultaneously having same risk factors?
Very good question. We want to follow population, for example, for myocardial infarction. We can follow them for cancer as well. We can follow them for example, car accident as well. We can develop a questionnaire and ask some different questions. For example, our primary interest is finding association between smoking and myocardial infarction. But if we have total population and ask them about smoking or not, we can ask them about hypercholesterolemia or not, about diabetes or not, about obesity or not. So we may have many exposure and have two groups considering each exposure and follow them and assess several outcomes. Based on your budget, based on your human resource, you may have different questions in your mind and answer to this question. So, we have several cohort studies in Iran. We have Iran cohort.ir, the website. You can see that site and follow the cohorts under study. We have, for example, Tehran lipid and glucose study that survived for 25 years. The length of a study is 25 years. To answer to several questions about the relationship between measurements, for example, diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, or something like that, and different outcomes such as cancer, such as cardiovascular disease, such as dementia or something like that. Okay? To obtain data about outcome, we may use different approaches. For example, we may questionnaire to participants and ask them to answer, for example, to some questions. Have you ever been hospitalized, for example, during past years? Have you ever experienced, for example, a car accident or something like that? We may have telephone calls and ask them about the occurrence of disease. We may have personal interviews. We may invite them to come to our study center again and ask them about question and have, for example, lab measurements, EKG or something like that to find the events, to find the occurrence of the diseases, and reviewing the reports in the hospitals. If patients have been hospitalized, we may review the reports, the medical reports, and find the events among them. Okay? What is the problem of this approach? We found that this study design is very good, and we can find some key points about causality, about the priority of risk factor to disease, and something like that. But what is the disadvantage?
Time.
Time. Very good. It is lengthy. Yes? The difficulty is that the study may take many years to complete. For example, if incidence of a cancer takes, for example, 20 years, we should follow the healthy population for 20 years to find the disease occurrence among them. So, it is expensive because you should follow those populations for several years. So, based on time and based on the required budget, it is sometimes not feasible. It is not feasible to do cohort study. Yes? How can we solve this disadvantage?
Yes, uncle.
How can? RCT? No, in cohort design. We have some methods to decrease this limitation. Another disadvantage of cohort study is loss to follow-up. Did you remember loss to follow-up in the session of incidence? Yes? It means that we cannot follow all participants. Why? Because some of them
Maybe they
may die due to the other causes, for example. Migration, change of occupation. For example, if the exposure is a certain type of job, the participants may change their jobs and they are not exposed as well. So, loss to follow is another advantage and another drawback of the cohort study. But these two or three important limitations have some solution. We want to find some healthy population and follow them forward. Can we go backward? Huh? Think about it. We have another type of cohort study that is retrospective cohort. That was prospective cohort. We select the individuals here and follow them by calendar time. But here, it is retrospective. What does it mean? It means that we begin the study from here, but
Evaluate past.
the main question is association between smoking and lung cancer, for example. I know that there is a very good form considering the status of smoking in, for example, workers of that factory. It is related to 10 years ago. So, exposure, that is smoking, has been documented in 10 years ago from a list that is provided by, for example, that factory. We can consider that exposure from that registry, and this time, for example, 10 years has passed. We are here right now. We can invite the workers and assess the, for example, lung cancer among them. Because we know that they were healthy at that moment. Why? Because they have been screened, for example, by factory responsible officers. Yes? We know that who were smokers and who were not. So, exposures are clear, being healthy is clear, and we are here right now. We use the data related to 10 years ago. Is it clear or not?
Yeah.
Yes? It is retrospective cohort study. Sometimes,
What about incidents here?
yes,
Can you find incidents here?
yes.
In retrospective.
Why?
We are going to class. How we can?
To find incidents, we need time. Okay? We need time. Here we have time again. I can show you, sorry. Here you have time. 2002, 2022. We have 20 years here. In prospective, we are here and we follow them for the future 20 years. In retrospective, we are here and the lists are available related to 20 years ago. So we have time between exposure and disease. The list of exposure was provided by the other researcher related to 2002. Yes? We are here and examine the participants for having lung cancer or not. So, 20 years are between exposure and outcome. Instead of designing a new study in which I can access the smoking here, and 20 years later, we can assess the lung cancer. Here, we assess the lung cancer and use the exposure from 20 years ago. It is retrospective. That was prospective. Both of them have time. So, incidence can be measured, can be calculated in both design. Okay? Sometimes we can combine these two approaches to each other. How? For example, there is a registry related to 5 years ago. We want to follow the population for 10 years. We can use that list. We say 5 years and we follow the participants for 5 years in the future. So say 5 years from the past. And after 5 years, we can follow, we can assess the participants regarding the outcome. Okay? It is the combination of retrospective and prospective. Here, you are here as investigator. You can follow and follow the participants in the future for occurrence of the disease. It is concurrent or prospective. Here, non-concurrent or historical cohort. You are here and you use the data from previous year. In mixed design, you are here in the middle of this study. You can use the registry of exposure from here and follow the participants to, for example, find the outcomes. So you save this part of follow-up for yourself. You can decrease time and money that are required for doing this study. Yes? Okay. Here, you are investigator. Go forward for prospective and go backward for retrospective part. Please read this example and tell me which kind of a study is this.
Retrospective.
Yes, retrospective.
Retrospective.
Recent 20.
Yes.
Retrospective, why?
Because we are using the
It
data
is
of previous
using-
10 years. We are using the data of previous 10 years.
He is in
Very good.
2023, but he is studying of 2012.
Very good. The information of exposure is related to 2012. We are here and we want to examine the participant right now. It is retrospective.
Khanam, the questions will be like that in exam.
Sorry?
In exam also the questions will be like this.
Sometimes, some questions, yes.
What about other questions?
About the other sessions. Yes. If you understand the meanings of epidemiology and if you attend in the class, you will pass your exam.
Only
If
pass.
not,
What
I
about,
cannot promise you.
what about absence? Like if someone has more than 4 session absence, you will be removed.
Sorry for them.
You will? Yes, so,
I'm sorry for them
we already have seen.
because my final exam is comprehensive. If you do not attend in the class, you cannot answer to the question. It depends on you. We have so many failures during the previous term.
But doctor, some of them is, I think it's again we studied. We studied them from the first session, I think. The thing that you explained. I think it's, we studied them. Am I right? Yes.
No, it's the
And the contents which are in the slides cover the exam content or not?
sorry.
The contents you included in the slides which cover the whole exam contents or not?
Yes. Yes. Which kind of study? Prospective, retrospective, prospective. Okay? And the third.
Mixed.
दोनों पहले बताया एक दूसरा
We will give the options.
How many years have you saved using this approach? What type of this of study is?
8 years.
3 years from class,
8?
8 years.
Yes.
3 years.
8 years.
What is the final years that you need to find the disease.
The total is 10 years. We saved 8 years, and in the future we did 2 years more. Yes.
So the study will be started by 2015. The final date of the study is
2025.
2025. Yes? So you need 10 years.
Yes.
Yes?
Total 10 years.
But based on
In the past 8 years.
mixing prospective and retrospective, you will follow the participants from 2023. So you saved 8
8
years.
years.
Okay.
What else?
But we have some potential biases in cohort study. Bias is a kind of systematic error that may misleading the study results. Is non-participation and non-response. Okay, what does it mean? Non-participation and non-response. If you ask, for example, some participants to come into your study, to participate in your study, and they don't want to attend in your study, but they are systematically different from the other population who do not refuse to participate in your study. So the samples are not representative for the whole population. For example, if your exposure of interest is smoking, some smokers do not like to attend in your study, and especially they are different from the other smokers, considering the risk of being diseased. So you have some bias in this situation. You should be cautious to minimize such non-response and non-participation. Another bias is loss to follow-up. For example, please consider a situation in which we want to find the association between obesity and, for example, myocardial infarction. Some obese population who are most at risk to developing a disease might be lost and do not continue to participate in your research. In this situation, you may lose some association between body weight and outcome. Why? Because the population, the high-risk population, refuse to participate anymore. And especially, they were more at risk, and the probability of being diseased was higher among them. So, based on loss to follow-up, you may have some misleading results. So it is important to convince the participant to continue the study on up to the end of a study. Okay? If the quality and extent of information obtained is different for exposed person and non-exposed person. For example, I am interested in finding the outcome among smokers. So, I may ask them enthusiastically, yes, with more interest. I emphasize about, do you are you certain that you are not diseased? Really think about it. I emphasize on finding the positive answer from exposed, but from unexposed, I may ask, are you diseased? No, and I can pass. So, based on the interest of the researcher, the quality and extent of information might be different. What is the solution? The solution is masking. It is better not to be known about the situation of exposure. If I, as a researcher, do not know the previous history of, for example, exposure among population, my interest to find the outcome would be the same for exposed and for non-exposed. Okay,
but sometimes the exposure may forget what happened in the past. He may not recall.
You know, recall is not a problem in cohort study. It is a problem in case control study. Why? Because you ask about the history of exposure. But in cohort study, you may assess the exposure in the participants right now and will follow them for the future. So it doesn't need to have a memory of previous history, because the history is related to current time. Yes, but sometimes for historical cohort study or retrospective cohort study, we have this kind of bias. Why? Because the quality of the reports that we want to use in retrospective cohort study might not be efficient, might not be good. Why? Because the other researcher, for example, filled in another questionnaire, another form, and we want to use that information. Sometimes the information is not complete and it would be misleading for us. So, if I want to summarize the advantages of cohort study, what are the advantages? Please name.
Actually, temporality.
Temporality, it means that the sign of causality is more clear. Yes? The other advantages?
Accurate reaching of disease. Accurate reaching of disease.
Accurate. Yes. You mean that you make certain that the disease is happened. Yes. You can confirm the occurrence of disease. Yes.
Time is less consuming.
Time.
Yeah,
In
when we
next
compare
cohort, we
in
can save time.
Time is is it disadvantages?
Yeah, when we compare it, it means 5 years of back, it becomes less. Or
Yes, yes. Compared to the prospective, do you mean? Think about a situation in which you have a rare exposure. Which design is better? Case control or cohort? Huh? I asked you two questions. Two different scenarios. In one scenario, the exposure is rare, and in another scenario, the disease is rare. Which design is suitable for each scenario?
Case study for disease. Case study for disease.
Case study? Case study, what does it mean? Case control?
Case control for disease.
For?
Disease.
For rare disease.
Rare.
Yeah, for rare disease.
Why?
Because we're talking about a particular disease and we can't trouble in that
I told you an example about
the cancer.
leukoplakia carcinoma of mouse. Yes? I told you that we cannot follow, for example, for 10 years
Yeah.
to find one disease. Yes? If we follow, for example, 1 million population, we may have one leukoplakia carcinoma after 10 years. It is not cost benefit for us. So, for rare disease, case control is efficient and is suitable because you can find disease from a registry, from, for example, hospital or something like that. But how about rare exposure? For example, if our exposure of interest is atomic bomb, exposure to atomic bomb. If we have, for example, 1 million individuals in our study, how many of them have exposure to atomic bomb? None of them. It is very rare. And the exposure is so uncommon. Because in case control study, we want to have some disease and some non-disease. And ask them about the previous history of exposure. If we have even 1 million cases and controls, and ask them about the atomic bomb exposure, none of them have experienced. So we cannot find any association between exposure and outcome. But in this scenario about rare exposure, cohort study is very good. Why? Because it is in our hand. Because the study is started by exposure and outcome. So if, for example, a city is exposed by atomic bomb, we can design a cohort study and follow the population of that city and compare, for example, those populations with the other city that is not exposed. So, for rare exposure, cohort study is very good. Okay? Another advantage of cohort study is ability to assess several outcomes. As you asked me a couple of minutes ago. Yes? Because we can follow the participant, for example, for 10 years. If I invite them to coming to the study again, and we want to follow them to assess the event, we can assess, for example, several outcomes. If the exposure of interest is smoking, we can follow the smokers and non-smokers for hepatic cancer, lung cancer, MI, stroke, and something like that. So, the relation between exposure and several outcomes can be possible. Okay? So, the advantages of cohort study: precise measurement of exposure is possible. Why? Because we don't have recall bias here. Why? Because we measure the exposure by ourselves. The temporality can be assessed. Rate exposure can be studied. Many outcomes can be studied simultaneously. Recall bias is minimized compared with a case control study. Incident rates can be calculated. Okay? We have reviewed all of them. Indication of a cohort study: good evidence of relationship between exposure and outcome. Exposure is gray, but incidence of outcome is higher among exposed. Short duration between exposure and outcome. If the duration between exposure and outcome is so long, it is not cost benefit to design a cohort study. Why? Because the researcher might yes, might be dead after before finalizing the study, I mean. Okay? Assessment of several outcomes, possibility of follow-up, and availability of ample funds. I told you that it is an expensive study, so financial resources should be clear before developing this kind of study. We start with people free of disease and assess exposure at baseline and assess disease status at follow-up. These are repeated